guys, it's Mark.
It's Michelle.
This is Mark and Michelle. And we are taking a break from our
Teaching slides.
There we go, teaching. And we thought we would go into how we got where we are today. And what we thought we'd do is give a little bit of our backstory so that folks would know how we started this journey and why we continue to do it, how we met, and that type of stuff. So,
so Mark's going to go all the way back.
I'm going all the way back. I won't go all the way that far back, but
to birth.
I won't go that
to
far.
To pre-birth.
No, that's too far back. That'll bore everybody. What I'll do though is I'm gonna start in school, because that was I thought school was just me sitting in a little room reading and writing all day and learning. And then it never occurred to me that there'd be tests. It never occurred to me that there'd be quizzes. It most definitely didn't occur to me that there would be playing with other kids. I mean, I just never thought of that.
Like recess?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had it, and I thought, okay, well, that's cool. I mean, we do this at home, but I did it with my sister. You know, we just played.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, so started kindergarten. Now, I started in kindergarten in Michigan around 1974. And so that first year of school was interesting because I was just starting the alphabet, and I thought that was cool. And I was in a room with other kids. We took our naps and that kind of stuff. We had recess. But you know what? I think unlike NTs, I mean, I don't know how many NTs remember who they were in kindergarten with. I don't remember who I was in kindergarten with. I don't remember the faces. I don't remember the personalities. I don't.
Do you remember the teacher?
I remember the teacher, only because she had a strange name, and back then you could smoke in the classroom. And
seriously?
Yeah, they did. They were both of Christy's kindergarten teacher. I can't remember her name, but my kindergarten teacher's name was Mrs. Wanty, and the both of them were from New York. And this being the early to mid 70s, New York was going through, I think, the whole country was going through an economic crisis and a gas crunch. And and so I think they were New York transplants to Michigan. And so I remember them smoking in the classroom.
Wow. None of my teachers ever smoked in the classroom.
Yeah, well, that's the only place I remember seeing them smoke. Of course, had they smoked anywhere else, I wouldn't have known it. But I mean, you know, I do remember seeing Mrs. Wanty standing in the classroom doorway smoking. So that's the biggest thing I remember from kindergarten. That and taking naps. I hated taking naps. I didn't want to go to sleep. There was too much to look at and do, you know, not with people, just too much to look at and do on my own, you know. And I was fine on my own. I'd sit in the chair by myself and look through books, couldn't read yet. But then I think we were listening to things too that early, you know. So headphones, and we listened to little record 45s or cassette tapes or something. But first grade was really cool. And again, I don't remember any of the kids I was in first grade with. But I remember my first grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Stanowski. And she took an interest in me for some reason. I don't know why. Hey, Amy, Taj, how are you guys? Thanks for being here. And so Mrs. Stanowski, my first grade teacher, first grade was where I learned how to read. Now, that was awesome, because then the world opened up to me. Of course, as far as I was concerned, the world was just in books. I didn't care about people. I don't even remember kids from any other classes. The only kids I do remember from elementary school were kids who picked on me. That was the memory. If they picked on me, I remember it. And but if they didn't, if they were just, you know, nice kids, they didn't stick out. Not enough for me to remember anyway. But so learning to read in first grade was cool. And
so you really didn't have a lot of autism problems in the learning department.
Yeah, but see, learning in kindergarten and first grade and second grade and that kind of thing, you know, we found my old report cards before we moved from Atlanta. And the report cards mostly showed that I did well in subjects, but I didn't do all that well in getting along with other people. The civility, that's what they called it back when we were in school, civility, and you know, being nice to other kids. I didn't fail it, but I didn't shine at it either.
So you were very high functioning at that point.
At that point, and see, and let me point that out. That's a good point, because at that point, I was high functioning enough to not really have problems, other than being picked on, not going to sleep, but then being isolated and fine being isolated. You see what I mean?
So what year did you start having trouble?
Oh, let's see. Truthfully, and I'll make, hey Marlo, I'll make the rest of my elementary school years quick. My first grade was where I learned to read, and that was awesome because we did the Dick, Jane, and Spot books, you know, and that was cool. So first grade was awesome because I learned how to read, and I just kept on learning how to read because I just loved being able to read about so many different things. So from then on, I was in the library. If there was a library, I knew about it. And in Michigan's where my dad taught me how to use the card catalog in the library, and that was awesome too because then research, you know, and so I did that. So I did third grade in Michigan, third grade partly here, and then
here being Oklahoma City.
Here in Oklahoma City, then part of third grade in North Carolina. Then we came back, and I think I started fourth grade here, and then I did the rest of fourth grade in North Carolina. Then we came back here, and I did part of fifth grade here and part of fifth grade in North Carolina. Then we came back. Nope, I didn't do any of sixth grade here. I did all of sixth grade in North Carolina, fifth grade in North Carolina, sixth grade in North Carolina, seventh grade in North Carolina, eighth, ninth, and 10th grade. Now, where I started having problems, seventh grade, junior high school. I could tell that junior high school was more social, even though I didn't know what social was, because I remember my first F was in English in seventh grade. That was my first F. Now, I remember hearing interactions between kids when I was in seventh grade, and noticing that they weren't, "Hi, how are you? Let's go play." They were more complex than that. Such and such is going out with, and they were fooling around. I didn't know what that meant then. And then, which is interesting because in seventh grade, other kids were fooling around. I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
So, but then I would hear things like, "Well, such and such, she has a stepdad who doesn't like her," or she has a stepdad who has been hitting on her. I remember hearing that.
Oh.
You know, so that's seventh grade, and it sounded like things were more complex between people, even though they weren't between me and everybody else. But while I don't remember getting picked on in seventh grade or eighth grade or ninth grade. In 10th grade, I did quite a bit. And 11th grade, now 10th grade, by the time I hit high school, 10th grade was high school in North Carolina, not ninth grade. So by the time I hit 10th grade, relationships were a lot more complex, and I didn't even bother keeping up with them. Not that I was trying to, it's just that my brain just didn't register how complex relationships were by high school, you know. And so I hear such and such, well, she's going out with that guy, she's going out with that girl. I heard that once. I mean, this is the mid-'80s. So, so I heard that kind of stuff, but it held no meaning for me, you know. And so let's fast forward 12th grade. I did 10th grade in North Carolina, and that was my last year in North Carolina. 11th grade in Florida. 12th grade in in Atlanta, Georgia. That was my last year of high school. Well, that was my last year of high school. That was the biggest school I'd ever been in, and there were 3,000 kids in that school. And out of 3 grades, I think the senior class was about 1,100 kids. And so, but I didn't know any of those people. And my best time was 11th grade in high school. I remember some of those kids, although I don't keep up with any of them. So, and senior, I didn't know any of those kids, and I don't remember any of them, and I don't think I've ever seen any of them since I graduated 32 years ago. So anyway, there was no social life for me really in school. Really wasn't one outside of school, and I worked.
So fast forward to when we met.
Let's do that.
You hadn't had a lot of relationships. I know you were friends with Bones.
Yeah, Bones Newell, Carl Newell, and I was friends with him. But when I say friends, this is what I mean. I hung around him, and I knew, I heard stories about him. He heard stories about me, but they really held no meaning other than they were stories, and people might ask, well, how was that relationship? To me, what relationship? I mean, I just heard stories about him, and that was about it. It was just a series of stories. And to me, Bones means a series of stories. I mean, that's kind of how I see people, And truthfully, Michelle, even when I met her, after I'd learned a lot of her stories, Michelle to me was just a symbol, a human personification of a bunch of stories.
That's interesting. I've not heard you say that before.
Well, kind of just now I realized it.
Coalesced.
That's how, yeah. And so by the time we met, see, that night we were sitting in the park in the dark. That sounds like Dr. Seuss. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book and a naughty Dr. Seuss book. But the park in the dark, and we were talking. I realized that your story was like my story. Because she grew up the daughter of a Baptist minister. I didn't grow up the daughter of a Baptist minister. I grew up the son of a Pentecostal one. So, so between those two things, we have very similar stories. Neither one, we didn't grow up wealthy, nothing like that. We always had money worries. We were kind of lower middle class, working class, And but what I found out listening to her is she remembered people that she went to high school with. She remembered people that she went to college with and was still friends with lots of them.
Yeah, lots.
Yeah. And, and I actually regretted not knowing people, especially after I met her. There was some kind of regret because I was like, man, why didn't I keep up with those folks? I remember thinking that once, although that's all I did.
Yeah,
I was like,
one thought and it was gone.
Yeah. And so it wasn't a big deal for me.
It's more like a comparison.
Yeah. It was so momentous. It was like being knocked down with an F. Right.
That's a feather.
Exactly. And so when we met, again, connection, I connected to her based on information. And that's how ISBs do it. When they get together, it's like a bunch of computers just trading information through the air.
But I connected to him with emotion.
Yeah, and I didn't really know what that was.
Now, how does that work?
Even though I can say that there was enough of an attraction, and I might have been able to feel it because it was kind of like, like we're being pulled together.
Yeah.
And I could kind of feel that. I remember that, but I didn't know what that was. I could have said, ooh, that's attraction. I'd been like, oh, there's this weird feeling I get when I'm around you. That's probably how I would have described it. Well, yeah, either that or it was that lunch I had. One of the two. But that's how I would have described it then. But what was interesting is because we had a similar background, and she knew what I was talking about whenever I talked.
Yeah.
And I knew what she talked about whenever she talked. It felt like it was right.
Well, he was very interesting. He had read so much stuff. Oh, stop.
Well, and so, but she was interesting. See, most women that I encountered my age didn't know squat what I was talking about. And so And then truthfully, to be honest and fair to them, I didn't know squat what they were talking about either, because usually they were talking about some pop star or some show that they were watching. And I'm like, I didn't
I
even
had
watch.
a degree in music, so I knew what he was talking, because he was a music lover.
I was, and I still am. Although I don't listen to the music much that I listened to back then, but because I've learned how to appreciate jazz.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, because that's a very emotional music.
Yes.
And most music moves you emotionally, but jazz moves you in a very different way, which is cool. So so we met, and we just kind of fell in together, but I knew it was right somehow.
So I met this man, and I married him a month and a half later.
We knew each other for a week and a half.
Yeah.
Then I asked her early one morning. We stayed up all night for like a week and a half, talking, getting to know each other. Early one morning when the sun was just coming up over the trees, I said, so, hey, you want to get married? And she goes,
I said, I thought we'd already decided this.
I'm like, no, we haven't talked about this yet.
I was perplexed, because
I was
I thought
perplexed.
for sure we were already getting married.
Right. Well, and she was sure. Well, she goes, well, yeah. And so then we were getting married. Right. And so what was it? About a month and a half later, it was a month and a half later, the end of July, because we met at the beginning of April, May, June.
I moved in May.
No, you moved in May. So May, June. Yeah. It was probably 2.5 months, something like that. So at the end of July, July 22nd, it was a Friday. We got married. We went down to the courthouse after I got off work. So I was all still sweaty and greasy from having worked lunch at the restaurant. And so I dressed up in a nice suit and that kind of stuff. We went down to the courthouse. We barely made it there in time. We get down there, and a judge comes out and says, look, we're going to have to marry you guys in the hallway because all of the courtrooms are filled with divorce cases. Yeah, this is the true story. And so my best man was a mistress of. Okay, well, my best man was a woman.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
She's having to correct me on details here. My best man was a woman, and she was friends with our maid of honor, who was a Russian guy.
Yeah.
And so the Russian guy, he giggled a lot, and giggled loud enough so that the judge had to shush him a number of times. And so we got through our wedding, and
oh, wow.
Wow, that's quick too. And did you guys get married too, or just move in? And so, so anyway, we got married, and we went for a 3-day honeymoon up to a small town in Georgia, and in the mountains. And we had fun. We wound up staying in our room for most of those 3 days because it was like 90-something degrees in the mountains. Yeah. And so, but anyway, we had fun. We watched a bunch of reruns of I Love Lucy and Dick Van Dyke, and all the shows we grew up on. And
but then later, things started not working very well.
For instance, see, work was always stressful for me. Now, being married to somebody that I didn't really know.
Oh.
Hey, that's like us. You guys have been married for 25 years, huh? And so work was stressful for me, but I bring that stress home. And I didn't realize that I was. It's just that my brain was trying to solve problems that I had at work with people.
He was never happy.
No.
Ever.
No.
And I was like, but we had so much fun before we got married. What happened?
Yeah. Well, and so.
And he didn't like cuddling. That was confusing to me.
Yeah. In other words, hugs. A little more than hugs, but now I like it.
Yeah.
But that is a good point, because technically that's touch. Mm-hmm. And I didn't like it. I didn't know I didn't like it, actually. But
you kept telling me I was too needy.
I did. I was a jerk.
You were a bully.
Yeah, I was. Not intentionally, but that's just how I interacted. And I've since come to see that most adults with autism interact with others that way. And because they think they're right. They think they know everything. I acted like I knew everything, you know.
So living with him caused me to get sicker, because I was diagnosed with Lyme disease when I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
And
that'd be 91. Mm-hmm.
So I had 3 years of antibiotics, and I never felt like I felt good after that either. And then I kept getting worse. And then the stress of living with him.
Yes, I was not easy to live with when I was autistic.
Not at all. I mean, he never hit me, but just the constant rage. Never happy. Ever. Never. Ever. Ever happy.
The constant solving problems at work with people out loud.
Yeah.
Because,
to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And asking her for help.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So by the time I was in my 30s, I was hardly able to go to work. I was so sick.
She was.
With migraines, frozen shoulders, gut issues, extreme.
And I'm thinking some of the diets that we tried added to that.
Yes, because
Atkins,
we started the Atkins in 95, I think. Because I was sick already, and I could tell that eating cheese made me sicker, that eating bread made me sicker.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was already searching for diets by the time I was 25.
Yeah, true.
So, but I kept getting worse. And now I know, because we were doing those high-fat, low-carb diets made me worse, and the stress of living with him. So by the time we were in our 40s, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, and we were both really sick because
he didn't work for 4 years.
I didn't. I started school, university in Georgia State University in Atlanta in 2000, and I did the first 3 years doing an anthropology degree. Loved that. That was fairly easy for me, and I had a fairly high grade point average. I think it was probably a 3.0, and that wasn't a problem. But I'll be honest, when I was autistic, I didn't have my own mind. And what I mean by that is it was very difficult for me to know how I felt about something to make a decision from that. And so at the end of my anthropology degree, somebody pointed out, you probably need to make yourself more marketable by getting a degree that's more relevant to something. And I thought, maybe they have a good point. So I thought, well, I like biology. Let me go do that. All right. Well, I was on loans I took out loans with the federal government for the anthropology degree. And then I reached my lifetime maximum of $50,000 when I finishing up the anthropology degree, and then the first year or so of the biology degree. Then I took out private loans. Well, I wound up taking out a total of like $225,000 because I thought, that's all right, because when I graduate, no problem, I can pay this back. And so I went ahead. When I started taking the biology degree, then I started seeing learning problems. And because I love biology, but biology is a huge mountain of information. I mean, no matter what class it is biology, any subject in biology is a huge mountain of information. And so trying to get through all of that information, keep up with that. I was working full-time, going to school full-time, anywhere between 12 and I think once I took 21 hours.
Yeah, that was dumb.
Yeah, that was.
We didn't know.
That was. I didn't know. I just thought, and I'll continue with this. So here I was trying to get through the mountains of information in biology classes, work full time. I also had a part-time job once a week working at the CDC as a student intern. And then I came home and wasn't making her life easy, nor was my life easy. And so marriage was hard. So relationships were a problem for me because I could be a terror at work too. And nobody's fault, not my fault. I didn't ask to be born with autism, right? Or I should say regress because of vaccines or whatever it is that causes it, But I had the problem nonetheless. So with the biology, then I had to take organic chemistry. Hardest class I've ever taken. That's like 2 mountains of information each semester. Well, I failed it the first time. So I'm like, okay, you know what, I bet I could probably get it the second time. So I took it the second time. Man, I failed it the second time too. So I thought, okay, you know what, maybe I can get it the third time. So I took it the third time. I failed the third time too. I wound up taking organic chemistry 7 times. And I needed a C. The highest grade I got was a C minus. I took the class one more time, the 7th time, and I thought, okay, maybe I can make better. I made a D that time.
So we're trying to show you how hard life is with autism so that you can heal your kids while they're young. Because we don't want anybody to have to go through that.
Exactly. And you know what, and I saw teachers that I had before. See, I took calculus 5 times too. I couldn't get through that. The best I made in that class, I think, was a D. And genetics 3 times, general chemistry 3 times. I realized that after taking organic chemistry 7 times, that I probably wouldn't be able to make it to organic chemistry 2 unless I did that 10 or 14 times. I just couldn't get the information soon enough to put it on a test and pass the tests. I couldn't pick it up because you have to be taught everything explicitly when you're autistic. And school requires you to be able to pick things up implicitly.
Well, and at this point, we still didn't know he was autistic.
Right. We weren't going to know.
Clue.
By 2008, when I took organic chemistry the last time, we weren't going to know for another 3 to 4 years. That was still 3 to 4 years in our future. And so I worked hard, but I thought I was just being lazy. And no matter what I did, I couldn't motivate myself to work harder. I thought, okay, let me take more classes. That didn't work. Let me take less classes. That didn't work. And
I taught him.
She did. I even set up stuffed animals and tried to teach them. And that didn't work because my brain just wouldn't pick it up. Now, elementary school and junior high school and high school, they're different. High school is a little more like college, but it's still not the responsibility. But if you see your kids struggling, find out why, and if it's autism, start on a recovery protocol of some type, even if you don't do medical medium. But medical medium, from all I've seen, is the easiest.
So we're going to fast forward to when we figured out that he was autistic.
Right. Okay. Because here's another thing that autistic adults have to deal with. They don't look forward to it because they don't realize it's coming. They don't realize it's going to show up in their life. Chronic under or unemployment. Now, in 2007, I quit my job at Borders because I got fed up with the rules. And I felt I was being treated unfairly. My skewed perception made me think that. Well, I was unemployed for the next 4 years. And I still had some loans coming in. But that made finances difficult in our house.
Well, by the end of that period, I was borrowing money from someone.
Yep, exactly.
Just to pay rent.
Uh-huh. Yep. And
I was working 6 days a week.
Mm-hmm. And I had been working.
And I was sick.
She was. And there were times when I worked 2 jobs, before I started school and things like that. Actually, I kind of worked 2 jobs most of my life, to be honest. And so if we moved somewhere, I'd work a couple of jobs, like a full-time or part-time job, so that she could start up her studio. Then her studio would start up, and she'd have students, and I'd quit the part-time job. That's how we did things. But 2008 to 2011, 2007 to 2011 was the beginning of that financial crisis that we had. And
we ended up moving here.
We moved here. But let me put it to you this way. I finished school. I didn't graduate until 2 years after I took my last class. I took my last class in 2008, didn't graduate until 2010. Somebody said, well, what are you going to do, Mark? You going to go to graduate school? I said, yeah, I'd like to. That'd be great. They said, okay, well, you need to find a mentor. I'm like, Mentor? It's a mentor. You need to build a relationship with a mentor, they said. Relationship? What's that? Okay, so I didn't know what that was. See, relationships are what you normally naturally form when your brain works correctly. Now I know that because I can do that now. But back then I didn't know all that. Now we're getting to a point here. So instead of applying for graduate school, I thought, well, I need to get a job. So in actually from 2007 on through 2011, I'd been looking for jobs. I applied for jobs that were in biology and in anthropology. In 1 year's time, I applied to 60 jobs at universities around Atlanta. Didn't get a call back. Then after that, I applied at jobs at retail places. I didn't get a call back. And I had recent retail experience for long periods of time. And so then we decided, okay, I need to do something else. So I thought, well, you know what? How about I volunteer? So I started volunteering at the Atlanta Zoo. After being there about 10 months, they told me, hey, we got a job open in large hoof stock, which was giraffes, rhinos, dikers, which are little antelopes, bongos, which are big antelopes, zebras, and that type of thing. And so I did that job for a month and a half, and I said, I'd like to stay on. And they said, no, you're done. So I wasn't going to have that job. So we decided we'd move to Oklahoma City. So Michelle was saving up money the best she could from her paycheck. And I actually got a paycheck of $1,400 total.
I thought that was mine.
No, that was yours from the place. But working at the zoo for those 6 weeks, I got paid $1,400, I think, in total. So that helped. But I had applied for a Panera Bread store manager's position here in Oklahoma City. So we move here, and we get here. I go to the interview, and I sat down. The three people looked at me. They were from Springfield, Missouri, which is about 5 hours from here. And they go, so why did you apply here? And more importantly, why did you move from Atlanta? And I'm like, even as an Aspie, I'm like, who cares why I moved from Atlanta? Why is that a big deal? One of the guys actually totally distrusted me. And I could tell by the look on his face. Now, if you're wondering, well, you're an Aspie and you can't really read people. Let me put it this way. Their emotions came across so strongly, I could see what was on their faces. And I knew what it was. And he looked at me, and he didn't believe anything that I said. Because he just couldn't believe that I would move from Atlanta to Oklahoma City.
Mark's parents live here. That's why we moved here.
Yeah, exactly. We moved here to be close to my family. So anyway, we go through that interview. At the very end of the interview, the woman who was in charge of the interview said, well, tell me why I should hire you. And I said, well, I'm really creative. And I faltered in my answer because I didn't know what to say. Well, I immediately saw her face fell, and she cut off the interview from there, and she looked at me and she said, thank you. You can go. And so I knew what that meant. I knew the interview, I didn't pass the interview, and that I wasn't going to get the job. So I went home and I told Michelle. She goes, well, now what do we do? I said, I don't know. So I went and applied.
I'm still real sick, by the way.
Yeah, she's still real sick, so I'd be the only one working. And so
apparently Mark was sick too.
Yes, autism is a sickness.
We figured that out.
It is an illness. So I went and applied at a grocery store, and I cooked in a deli for a while. And so I did that for a year. Then I moved to Whole Foods, and I've been there ever since.
And that's been a good experience.
All through recovery. Yeah, all through recovery. And I had a lot of people support there.
Yes.
And so
we, after that interview with Panera, he said, there is something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. And at the Atlanta Zoo, I had actually met a guy who had Asperger's syndrome. And someone told me he did, although I didn't know what that was. And so in 2006, a few years before I was working at the Atlanta Zoo, I had taken animal behavior class. That animal behavior class, I read Temple Grandin's book, Animals in Translation. I think that was, and after reading that, something lodged in my brain and stayed there about autism. And what was interesting is back in 2003, at the end of my anthropology degree, I worked at the CDC as a student intern. I worked in the Department of Nutrition and Physical Activity. So there were a bunch of PhD scientists who worked on nutrition, worked on physical activity, and they researched it, how it helped the human body, how it damaged the human body, and this kind of thing. My job was to take news articles and scientific articles and catalog them. Right? I'm sitting there at a computer typing in the names of these articles. I'm reading article after article about autism. Anybody else would have seen that as a sign, right? But not me. It just never occurred to me. And so from 2003, when I did that, 2011, I meet a guy with autism. Didn't know Asperger's syndrome was autism. And for those of you folks who don't know, it is. It all fits. It's just that the language skills are intact with somebody with high functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome. So anyway, and then after that Panera Bread interview in 2011, I started really seriously considering what my problem was. So Wired magazine, back in 2001 or 2002, had an autism quotient test that they published in their magazine, and they had it online. So I went and I took the test. I scored 71%, I think it was 71 or 73% likely to have high functioning autism, right? I told Michelle. Well, that really strained our relationship because to her, I was a totally different person than she married. And she spent the next 24 hours going through the entire grieving process for her old husband, and made peace with the new one.
Right. Because I knew it was my perception. I figured out, no, he's the same man. You just had this idea of him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so she made her peace with her new husband in a day.
And that's when we started Happy Robot. So if you're interested in seeing writings by me and Mark while he was autistic, our page Happy Robot Coaching
is still up on Facebook.
Still up. Because I think it's valuable.
It is valuable. And then the next year, I finally got a diagnosis in 2012. I went to a psychologist here who worked with college kids who were on the spectrum.
So by this time, I had done a lot of research and was really understanding him. And I learned how to become a what do you call those people who help you?
Advocate.
Advocate.
Yeah.
That's the word. I became an advocate for him at his work.
Yeah, she actually went to my job one time, and I didn't know it, and to stick up for me.
Because he had done something again.
Yeah. And so anyway, that is how I first figured it out. And so between me and Michelle, we went, the psychologist, she interviewed us for a good long time. And she called us back a couple weeks later. We went to her office and she said, guys, this sounds like very classic autism. And she said, not only do you have high functioning autism, you have Asperger's syndrome. She said, you also have what is called obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And she said, you use rules to make sense of your world. She said, and you are obsessive about following the rules. You're obsessive about learning about the world. She said, and you won't give up until you figure it out or solve whatever problems you have. I said, that's me.
And I said, that's him.
And so, as you can see, the process is the same for an adult discovering that you have autism, because you have all these problems and you're like, why am I having all these problems? I don't get it, And I know a lot of autistic adults think, well, these aren't problems, they're superpowers. Okay, well, if you don't have a job, what's your superpower getting you? If you don't have a girlfriend, what's that superpower getting you? If you can't relate to your loved ones and you can't accept a hug and you can't accept help from somebody, is that superpower really working for you? And don't tell me I mismanaged mine. That's utter BS. Because I worked really hard at trying to solve my problems before I knew what the actual problem was. Ask her. She saw me, and she lived through the universe of angst that I created.
Yes.
trying to solve my problems without knowing what the problem really was.
Yes.
So Universe of Angst could be a name of a book I write.
Yeah.
Because I could. And we are. So we have taken she has transcribed some of our lives, and that book will be out here pretty soon. We'll let
Maybe
you know.
in 2 weeks.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But we wanted to give our story.
So,
she's got more to say.
His point was he wanted to understand people.
I wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand people even when I was a kid, because I was into languages. I was into other cultures. I wanted to know about other cultures. I tried to teach myself Chinese just by reading the Chinese books. That didn't work. Japanese the same way. German and Russian. This was all when I was younger than 10. And so I really wanted to understand people. To me, it was a big deal. I really wanted to understand where people were coming from, what their lives were like, and everything else. So the anthropology degree helped me do that. But as I got older, I wound up dealing with an internal problem, and I didn't know the source of it. For instance, here's a good example. I've cooked most of my adult life. I went to culinary school for a short time. I didn't finish that, which is typical for an autistic person. You guys know that. And so one of the culinary jobs I had, the chef was trying to explain something to me, and I didn't get it. I just didn't. He kept explaining it and explaining it. He goes, "We speak the same language, but there's a huge language barrier here." And I thought that was a weird statement to make, so it stuck in my brain. Well, I remembered it years later. It was 14, almost 15 years later, when I finally figured out I had autism and realized that's why there was a language barrier. The reason I couldn't understand people was because of the autism. So on the outside, I'm learning about other cultures. I'm trying to learn other languages. I took 2 years of French and wound up being decent at it, enough to get us around in Paris for a few days. But trying to really understand people, I couldn't.
So by the time 2012 came around and I happened to have this diet dumped on me, I wasn't looking for anything.
Actually, it was 2013.
Thank you. And I said, "Mark, what do you think of this?" Because I didn't think a diet would change anything. At that point, I just thought it was hardwired and he would be this way the rest of his life.
Right. And see, I never thought about whether I was going to stay this way the rest of my life. But the thing is, as many problems as I was having socially, it really became frustrating because I wanted to get along with people better. I wanted to interact with people in such a way that I could understand them deeply, if that's what they wanted to, you know. And but man, pushing for 45 years, trying to solve that problem externally, and then all of a sudden realizing that the internal conflict was the one that was keeping me held back. The autism was keeping me from achieving what I wanted in life. And so she brought home this diet, and I thought, well, you know, as much as I'm having problems with socially, let's try this diet and see if it improves anything. And since I had cooked my whole life, this diet was going to be easy. It was the GAPS diet. It was meat broth, meat, meat fat, fermented dairy, probiotics, and raw garlic. That stuff I could easily do, no problem. So we did. And we started seeing changes within a month and a half, within a month.
But you started feeling better pretty quickly.
I did.
Which kept you going.
Well, and I still distinctly remember that feeling. It was a month after we started, so it was August of 2013. And I had been on the broth and stuff. Now, for you GAPS folks, the introductory phase to the diet, for those of you who don't know what GAPS is, the introductory phase, you eat meat broth, raw garlic, fermented dairy, any other fats you can get, and probiotics, and you eat that for your 3 meals. All right? Because at that point, when you're on the introductory phase, you're trying to get as much healing as possible because your gut is so damaged it can't really have any other food. Most kids are on the introductory phase, I've heard, for just a month or 2. I was on it for 18 months. Every day, my meals consisted of meat broth, fat, fermented dairy, butter, raw garlic, and probiotics. And I got as much healing as I think I got as much healing as I could possibly get out of GAPS in that 18 months, in that year and a half. And so I saw a lot of changes. And what was interesting is in that time, on the first year and a half on the GAPS, I started to be able to read people's faces. I started to be able to read the emotion in their eyes. I started to understand their body language much better than I ever had. And I started to understand the tension in their muscles would tell me whether they were angry or upset or not. And this was all very subtle stuff that you guys normally do and you learn to do as kids. I'm learning this in my mid-40s up till 50. I'm still learning things at 50, like tonight, for instance. But we won't go into that now. But it's been absolutely fascinating because the GAPS diet and the medical medium diets have allowed me to understand people the way I wanted to ever since I was a kid.
So when we were in we started an adult.
In September 2014, it is, and this is long, but this is very informative, and you're going to love this story because you're really going to understand us when you completely watch this. In September of 2014, we started a support group for adults on the spectrum. And so we'd have monthly meetings. Go ahead.
So we started in 13, the diet,
Mm-hmm.
the end of 13.
Mm-hmm.
And then 14, Mark had changed a little bit, but was still fairly aspy, and we had this support group going. And we had about 20.
Mm-hmm. 20 who'd show up to the meetings. And anywhere between 12 and 20. The total members of the group reached about 25 or 26. And so we'd have monthly meetings. They would talk about problems they were having, and we'd help them figure out what to do about them.
Well, Mark started changing.
Well,
too much. I could see that he started not being able to relate with them, but he wasn't quite relating with me. And they were noticing.
They were noticing that I wasn't quite getting them. I wasn't being able to talk to them like I had. I would expect more out of them than they could give. And what it was is I couldn't fully remember how I was when I was still fully aspy, and how you needed to talk to me so that my brain could answer.
And they started being upset that he was changing because of a diet.
They got upset because we talked about the diet, and then I'd change. And then I changed some more. We were still on the diet, and I'd change even more.
And it ended up exploding.
It did. And they got mad because we kept talking about the diet. And Michelle had to hold 2 of them. Our one big rule in that group was you do not get to complain about NTs. And she was the only NT in the group. And so they would violate that rule sometimes. And either me or Michelle would say, hey, guys, remember, we don't complain about NTs in this group. We don't badmouth them, whatever else, because you'll hear that a lot from autistic adults. Oh, NTs are our biggest problem. No, autism is your problem. But because of your autism, you can't see that. So anyway, so in March of 2016, the group fell apart and they went off on their separate ways because I had changed so much. I wasn't willing. Truthfully, I changed so much. I won't say I wasn't willing. I had changed so much that I had basically metamorphosed out of that mindset. Yes. And I couldn't relate anymore.
But he still wasn't where I was.
No.
And the changes were difficult to go through that roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
It was very difficult. he would come home and he'd say, well, why didn't you, you would say something emotional. You wanted an emotional response from me.
Right.
And I couldn't provide one because I'd lived with him for 19 years.
She had closed herself down so much emotionally that it was like blackout curtains all over her emotional windows.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so she wouldn't let any out, because when I was autistic, if she let the silent but deadly emotional fart out,
yeah,
I was all over it.
Oh man, so I had shut down.
Mm-hmm. And so I was changing so much, and this was 2000.
He didn't even know.
Yeah, this was 2016, 15, and 16. I came home one night in the fall of 2015. I said, you know what? I want to know you better than I ever have. I want us to spend more time together. I want us to get to know each other, intimately, because I really want to know you. Right?
What do I do with that?
Here's what her answer was. At first.
You need to say that for a podcast.
Okay. Oh, well, she just had a surprised look on her face for a couple hours. And but then she said, but you know, I am in the middle of the relationship, and for you, this is a brand new relationship.
Yeah, that was pretty weird.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 19 years into, no, I'm more than that now.
Yeah, like
it was
20,
like 21 years into this relationship, and you are just now seeing it.
Yes, exactly. I was just waking up to the 21 years of marriage that we had, and I was wanting a brand new relationship, but she was already 21 years into it. And so then I got to the point just a few months later, I distinctly remember this. I would say something, and I would look at her and go, well, how do you feel about that? And she would be like, she would stop and freeze because she didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because she had been closed down emotionally for so many years, and that she couldn't explain how she felt.
Yeah.
And so she had to learn how to open herself back up.
Well, and I chose the improv route. I started taking classes on how to do comedy improv.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much saved my life, because it got me out. But boy, that was one of the hardest things. I can't say that's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was really a hard thing to do.
Right.
To open back up to life.
And so from there, as she opened back more up with improv, you know, it was funny because she was taking one of the improv classes, and she was stuck in there was a personal block.
Yes,
she was stuck.
Is playing love scenes.
And
I was like, I hate these.
And the teacher, I think Michelle mentioned why she felt that way, and the teacher said, well, you know, think about this. Your husband is waking up to a new you, and you're waking up to a new husband. And she realized that there was a block there, although I don't remember exactly what it was now, because that's been probably 3 years
I had
ago.
to do EFT on being willing to express love.
Right. And so, you know, that improv was a big deal for her, but it opened her back up so that she could communicate with me on an emotional level.
And it was perfect timing, because then we started the medical medium.
Yep.
Okay, but before this, though, we had a Happy Robot coaching page. We decided, you know what? Let's just leave this page. Mark had started talking to people on autism sites, because he was like, you can heal from this. He wants people to know.
Yeah.
So we started Heal Your Autism.
Yeah.
And then we started being able to help people from our page.
Exactly. And so that is our origin story. Was there more we wanted to talk about?
I just went blank because it's 11:40 at night.
Yeah, and I think we've covered most of it here. Let's see. But, you know.
But the reason we want to be here to help you is so that your kids, or you yourself, or your husband can experience the life that Mark has woken up to.
Yes. because you can wake up to it, and it's an awesome life because you could be free of the IEPs and the bullying and the chronic under or unemployment, the chronic loneliness, the chronic isolation, the chronic brain issues, the chronic learning issues. You could be free of all this stuff. It's not a quick fix, but
no, it's been 6 years for Mark, and he's still waking
and
up.
I'm
As
still
he mentioned about tonight, he had something happen.
right. And so it's absolutely fascinating, and the benefits far outweigh anything autism can give you.
And the sheer joy that we have seen from mothers who just, their kid decided they'd wear clothes.
Yeah, I know, right?
For the first time ever. So, guys, we are making products to help you start the diet, or to help so that you know what to expect, what to eat. And we're also developing a course.
Yes, it'll take a while, but we will keep you apprised of where we're at. But basically, it's the entire system that we use to get where we're at. And we're going to go through it step by step and show you how to do it step by step. And it'll be a full-length course, probably a few weeks long, a couple hours a day. But it will so be worth it, because at the end of it, you'll know exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it.
And on that note,
we'll see you guys tomorrow night, but not for an hour.
Not for an hour.
See you tomorrow.
Bye, guys.
Bye.